Продолжая разговор об инвестиции в
Continue conversation about investments into cybersecurity. Right now, we're going to speak about how the stock exchange feels itself in new realities and what are the new opportunities. What is the interest of investments of the stock exchange into the cybersecurity market? And we're going to speak about it with Alexei Khabarov, Managing Director of Investment Banking Products and Solutions from the Otkritie Bank. Kirill Panarin, Director Analytic of Internet Sector from Renaissance Capital, and Igor Makiyenko, Expert Representative of Investment Community. Hello. It's unusual for you to come to cyber range and speak about cybersecurity when you are related to the investment segment. However, in recent days, cybersecurity is a very interesting object for investors, and this is very important to open this segment for a wide audience of those who can be interested in this.
в новых реалиях. Каким образом он себя сейчас чувствует?
Let's begin with this market in these new realities. Whatever you see happens. Let's begin with you, Alexei.
В первую очередь, наверное,
Well, first of all,
и то, что на нем
the exchange market, I would divide into prior to 24th of February and after. If prior to 24th of February, it was classical growing equity market
делали
where everything was done by institutional investors in those recent transactions and share placements which were happening. Usually 50 or more % of demand was coming to foreign investors, and also largest public companies, shareholders and largest national shareholders were institutional investors. The situation right now have changed significantly.
наверное,
First of all, if we're going to speak about activities on the stock exchange, no activities of foreign investors are obvious. Russian institutionals are also. So the main weather on the market is made by physical entities who until recently were making 30 to 40%, right now more than 50% of turnover and demand for public shares are coming from physical entities. More than 50% of the turnover, yes, on average. Moscow Stock Exchange statistics.
Мне кажется, что в будущем, по мере стабилизации,
I think that in the future, along the situation will be stabilized in the economy, we see a lot of new placements, new names, and perhaps the main difference from what was happening before when companies were looking at the demand from the side of international investors, institutional ones. I think the new one will be done and developed by the physical investors. First of all, the depth of demand. I believe that
сделок он будет нам
the average size of new transactions will be much lower than prior to February, when we have seen IPO of $400, $500 million. Right now, the transaction of $150 million will be a normal transaction. It's going to be a new reality, and the main demand
будет
will be 50-60% will come from the side of physical entities, physical persons. Well, developing this conversation, I would like to add that due to the changes on the market, due to foreign investors have left and only Russian investors stayed in the market, two things are happening. We will see the changes in the approach to investment strategies and to the assessment of the company, because historically there were significant differences in preferences about risk appetite from American investors and Russian investors. And this is the first difference through which the sectors will be reassessed. And the second thing that I would like to add to this, well, the approach is different on this stage to the investment strategy. And I think in the West, we see a lot more funds and people who have invested deep fundamental analysis for their investment. So this is a sign of a better developed financial market. So right now in new realities, certain time will take for rebuilding this system and renovating this system, which creates possibilities as well. I would add to this that there was a good period of uncertainty when markets were frozen and big amount of private investors were positively looking at this jump and that was happening in the market. And when markets have spiked and first trading days, we have seen that they have supported very well those prices that were existing in the market. It helps this diversification by type of investors, helps companies. Honestly speaking, as my colleagues have said, there is a movement towards private investors. This marketing is a little bit different. They have different objectives. They are less susceptible to analytics. It's important that the company should be well known, and it should have interesting work with investors. That's why those trends that we have seen recently, when there was a big inflow of private investors from classical banking deposits into the investment, it was additionally realized and helped to stabilize our market. In addition to this, these investors perceiving more positively these new industries and being more particular, an example of your company have indicated that cybersecurity is interesting and it's important to tell people about it and justify it, and then this idea is going to work. Okay, let's speak about it.
Говоря о новых отраслях,
Speaking about new industries which are selected by investors, what attracts them? Because cybersecurity 1 year ago, even 6 months ago, nobody knew about this market. There is something unclear, not understandable, and niche marketed. But right now we see in our example as a market company, everyday interest is growing. What attracts people? The company, new economies, and things that we see in the world. Recently, in days of pandemics, when we have seen new reality, new channels of operations, they started growing. Respective company, new economy, and with the time, these trends they came to our stock exchange as well. People started placing money, and this placement was conducted, and investors, well, they've been reacting positively to this new information, to these new companies. So if not for these February events, I think this year we would see big amount of new placements, new IT companies, absolutely diverse companies. And on a step-by-step basis, we could see that we see not only big scale companies, but also more local companies, because the appetite for these risks does exist. I would add to these that for investors who search for growth shares, what was important to them? To them, it's important to see structural growth potential in the industry, and it's always important for the investors to select good quality companies and leaders. So the example of your company shows us that there is a high demand for these stories, and I would like to add to this, in the current realities when stock exchange markets go through very complicated life, it is very important for investors to invest into stories which are growing stories and profitable stories. And this is something that we're able to see prior to February events, and that profitable companies, they show even higher market dynamics than companies which require capital investments. Another thing that I would like to add to this, in addition to the fact that this sector is fundamentally growing one, it's much smaller. It depends less from what happens in the current realities of macroeconomics. If there are basic sectors which are really sensitive to GDP changes, if respectively GDP is dropping, the demand for oil, gas, and metals is also dropping. Your sector, cyber sector, is fundamentally growing sector, and also even in the most pessimistic scenarios, Plus, in the conditions of the fact that most of the foreign companies are leaving this market,
большой addressable market.
we see very big addressable market which continues to grow, and not many companies have possibility to broadcast this growth into positive financial indicators. What is important for investors? Good quality market, and how
Способна
these companies are able to transform this market share into growth and profitable growth, because historically, if you will take the sector of new economy in the wider sense, we have seen a lot of hype stories which have been growing very fast but which still have not become profitable. But the main difference of your story and cybersecurity sector and positive technology sector, that this is fast growing company which shows growth, and growth not only on the top line revenue but also profit as well.
Что вы думаете будет интереснее всего?
What do you think will be the most interesting for investors to know about positive technologies?
И мы привыкли,
Because we're technical guys and we speak in a very specific language which is not really understandable by my audience, and only our first experience when we come to the market and we say, okay, we're going to tell you about cybersecurity. 1 year ago, when we were in very difficult conditions,
говорили, ребята,
we've been told, okay, guys, why do you go to stock exchange? It's funny.
когда мы заявили, что мы
But when we have announced that we are not going to deny our plans to go to stock exchange, and we have added to this that we're going to place ourselves for physical investors without attracting investment funds, they've been showing like that. They said, well, we can expect everything from you on the basis of your plans, but perhaps
и поэтому вы
something is exploding in your head, and that's why you're making fantasies. But life has happened like that, and looks like there are no other options in the market, and that's why we are
что ли плавали.
this little ship that floats in this investment ocean and which attracts attention.
Интересно было инвесторам.
What would be interesting to investors? What should they learn about positive? Well, I would like to begin.
Мы говорим про частных инвесторов.
If we're speaking about private investors, they know brands. And when positive, to them, it's not the brand which is strong on the market. Of course, it's going to be important for them to know your agents. When you say that you work with largest Russian private and state corporations, of course, they all are known, and the level of trust to positive technologies is growing at the account of these agents. In addition to that, business scale, you have a lot of things to show, and profitability.
Эти три позиции, они очень...
I believe that these three positions are very important. Yes, I will agree with Igor, and I would like to add to this that investors should always hear about the future.
Пытаться объяснять, почему
And it is important to explain why this market is going to grow, why companies will invest more in cybersecurity, how much they're going to invest, etc. And topic number two, as I've told you previously, investors love to invest money into leaders of the market, good quality stories. So we have to show potential not only of the market growth, but also potential of positive growth inside of this market, how it's going to grow its share, in which segments, etc.
Наверное, дополнительно
And perhaps additionally, compared to institutional investors for whom dividends are important but not always important in the stories of growth. For physical dividends is something that they can feel physically. That's why the fact that you have started paying dividends is a very big positive step forward, which happens, and you can say that you can earn money not only on the potential of growth of exchange rate of the shares, but also on dividends, something that can be tangible.
Вы говорите много о том, что нужно быть
You say a lot that you need to be more transparent about the market, about companies, but today at 6:30 we are going to have presentation for investors where we are going to tell about all of these, and I hope it's going to be very transparent and understandable, because we have very big educational part in cybersecurity, and everything that happens here during this cyber fight is our face of the cybersecurity. That this is not just some guys in hoodies, some lamps are blinking, and it's not understandable what is cybersecurity. We are showing that cybersecurity is a well understandable thing. And first of all, it's understandable by its results. Which results should be understandable? Non-admissible events for different companies or for different industries of economy should not happen. Everybody totally depend on digital technologies, and if something happens, like during this cyber fight, the spill of the oil, the impact of the trains, some indecent content published on billboards, theft of big amounts of money, this is inadmissible. That shouldn't happen with those companies, and we are showing people that these can be, and the role of cybersecurity to prevent from this. So this is a basic need in our modern digital realities. And the completing question that I would like to ask you about the future of the stock exchange market, you said that most likely it's going to be the physical investor market. It's going to be the interest to invest into new direction of cybersecurity. How do you see a Russian stock exchange market in 1 year, 2 years, in midterm perspective? Well, in current realities we live now, 1-2 years, it's a very long period of time. But most likely the market will be stabilized at a certain moment of time. So I think that activities of Russian institutional investors will be restored. Also, in addition to the existing types of investors which are available right now, first of all, these are managing companies, we could see new types of investors which are not investing or investing very weakly into the shares. Well, I'm speaking like pension funds, and if a legislation is going to change, perhaps we will be able to see new institutional investors. And I believe that activity of physical investors is going to grow irrespectively to anything. So from this point of view, in addition to those factors that we just discussed, physical entities, they make decision about purchase and sales not alone. They work through big brokers, and each broker has a lot of analytics who write analytical recommendations about companies, and it is very important how those available brokers will stay active in making their research reports, and from their opinion, from how they are positive or negative, it will influence the appetite of investors to purchase new shares. Well, I will try to be optimistic as well. As we have discussed, it's understandable that investment base has changed, the market have changed, and I do agree that number of physical investors will grow. It is necessary to have more Russian local institutions and funds who would invest money into shares or our stock exchange. This will take some time, so it is going to be very hard to speak what's going to happen in several months or 1 year or maybe 2 years. But when this will happen, I believe that market will come back to stable growth. I see the future of our market as relatively positive, and this is related with the fact that market was dropping. Private investors, they've been taking it very painfully, and it is very important to have this feeling of this new level and some exchange growth, so that investors would not drop in their portfolio. Psychologically, it's a very important factor. Well, it's very clear that our market will be separate, and it's going to be oriented on the internal investor. And what can we observe here? We have enough liquidity in the country.
количество тех инструментов
we have a lot of investment tools that were available. They are available, and some of them have disappeared. And if we will see new ideas, then investors' money will overflow there.
некое такое сообщество, когда
And then we have this community
компании, в том числе
when
на бирже,
companies
там,
placed on the stock exchange, like on the highest level,
может быть, и вы
there will be structuring of the assets and the highest level of responsibility for investors. It's very important so that
корректно вели себя.
would behave correctly on the market, because the changes in certain sectors they influence the whole market.
Здесь,
That's why it is very important
но желательно, чтобы происходил рост. Это позволит
to see a certain growth, which is going to help investors to stay and look deeper in the existing options of where they can invest their money.
Вопрос.
And a final blitz question, and answer it like yes or no. Cybersecurity is a new oil and gas for investors. Yes, yes, yes.
Спасибо большое.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a conversation about stock exchange and new realities and the interest to investments into cybersecurity from the point of view of physical investors market.
Спасибо.